Hello, everybody. Oh, I have plenty of you present. That's wonderful. Thank you
Hi.
for waiting on me.
Oh, I'm glad. Hello.
Hello. How is it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. I had a trial today and was sprinting home to make it back in time. So I'm glad I made it just 1 minute late. It's been one of those days. How is everybody doing?
Good.
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 Good. Oh my goodness.
Good.
I'm going to tell
Okay.
Sylvia that this is one of my most dedicated groups in terms of who's coming to class. So that's excellent. Oopsies. I'm getting some feedback from somebody. Let me see.
Hi, Kelly. I'm here.
You are. How are you doing?
Yeah. I'm okay. I'm hanging in there.
You're probably keeping very busy, I bet, huh?
Extremely busy, but
Good.
I'm still putting in study time and I'm doing the best I can.
That's all we can ask, right? Oh, goodness sakes. Well, we're going to get rolling here in just a little bit. One thing that's important to mention is if you have headphones of any kind, earbuds, anything, that's important to use, because otherwise, if you decide to participate and take your microphone off mute, you can generate like an echo, because if you don't have headphones on, the machine will pick up my voice coming to you and then your voice coming to me, and it'll make this really horrible feedback. So grab some of those if you can, if you don't already have them. Let me see here. Make sure I've got it.
It's so funny. I'm watching you on my computer and also my phone. I wanted to see if I could do double.
Oh, fun. Interesting. You'll have stereo.
Oh, yes. I can see you. Yeah. Double.
Excellent.
Just wanted to try it.
Perfect. I should mention, everybody, Martha is a trailblazer. She has downloaded the Canvas app on her phone, which is something
I love
I've
it.
never used before.
I love it.
Is it going well? Good.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I use it whenever I have a spare 5-10 minutes, and I do the exercises and all of that. So I'm loving it.
Perfect. That is a great idea, because then you can just access what we have posted for each week right from your phone.
Yes, yes, everything.
Whatever's coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's helpful. I like that idea.
Yes.
If you guys do that, one thing that we learned when Martha was working on downloading that app is that you need to choose what school you're from. And normally that would be, University of Nebraska, University of Chicago, whatever it is. But for our purposes, you're going to enter free for instructors. That's the type of account I have. So if you download that and attempt to log in, choose free for instructors. All right.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. Well, tonight we had mentioned that our agenda, part of our agenda, had to do with working on arraignment terminology, and working through some of those exercises. So that's what we're going to spend most of our time on tonight. Because we are such a diverse crowd, we won't go too far down the rabbit hole on terminology. For those of you who do not work in Spanish, you'll notice that when I provide a glossary, I attempt to provide an explanation in English of the term to help guide you a little bit towards possibilities for either explaining the meaning if you have to in your other language, or you know, to help you have a clue of how you might go about saying it. Spanish interpreters, in the columns that I can, where it's possible, I've provided suggested renditions, but that's by no means an exhaustive list. So if you said something that doesn't appear on that column, it does not mean you made a mistake. It just means that my go-to rendition is a little bit different than yours. So you're welcome to ask about it, but you're also welcome to stick with what you know to be correct and used in your region. So it's just sort of a way to enrich your terminology. Oh, what was I going to say? Oh, last class we talked about some online resources for where you can research terms, especially those of you who don't necessarily have a wealth of information for terminology at your fingertips. So we'll continue to refer to those throughout class. And I'll try to remember to post them in Canvas for you. I'll put that on my list to do. Terminology resources. All right. What I would like you guys to do for now to get us warmed up, give people a little bit of time to arrive if they haven't already, is to grab some scratch paper. If you've got it close by. You could also type on your phone if you want. But what I'm going to have you do is, since you spent a little bit of time with some arraignment exercises, I just want to do a pre-exercise where I have you remember how you say some of the terminology you might hear in an arraignment. So my job is going to be to show you these terms. Your job is going to be jot down the terms on your scratch paper in your other working language. So if I say, how do you say rights? You're going to write that down. You know, we've got about 15 terms to kind of do a little quiz on to help us lock them in. All right, so let me get that shared. You guys are grabbing your scratch paper. And here we go. The only trouble with what I'm about to do is that now when I put this in presentation mode, I lose you. I can't see you anymore. So if something comes up, one of you can activate your microphones and say, Kelly, we can't see you, or Kelly, we can't see the presentation, because I won't be able to see you waving on camera for whatever reason. All right. So we're already in week 3, which is amazing to me, kind of make my head spin. Our plan for tonight is to do terminology review and sight translation and consecutive interpretation, all regarding arraignments. Some of you, if you've been working these exercises, have seen some of the material. It's okay. We're going to repeat it because, as we've talked about with the methodology we use, repeating exercises is good. Even if you get to the point where you have it memorized from start to beginning, that just means you've really internalized how the English is going to sound when it comes at you, which makes it much more likely that you're going to be able to be accurate when you're interpreting in the real world and on the day of your exam. So that's our plan. Our day meeting this week, for those of you who are able and interested in attending, our weekday meeting is Friday. It's at 12 noon and we'll go till about 1:15. I'll show up. You know, if there's nobody there after 5 minutes or so, I'll just start talking through a PowerPoint so that I have some kind of a recording. You guys can kind of just join as you're able and leave as you have to, but it'll be an informal meeting, and we will work on some simultaneous on Friday regarding arraignments. So that is our plan. Okay. Your job again is to have some scratch paper out. This is to wake up our brains with terminology we might have glanced over when we were starting to work with our arraignment exercises. I want you to jot down on your paper how you say plaintiff in your other working language. All right? Number 2, how you say defendant in your working language. And for arraignments, we're referring specifically to criminal defendants. In some languages, there's a distinction made between a defendant who's been sued in a civil case and a defendant who has been charged in a criminal matter. So I specifically want to hear your version of defendant in a criminal case, if there's that distinction made. Okay, arraignment. Arraignment is the type of hearings we are working with this week. So how would you say arraignment in your language? Jot it down. Hereby. Hereby is almost definitely a word you'll come across at some point, either in a judge's speech to a defendant or in a site translation. So how do you render hereby in your other language? Number 5, indictment. Indictment is a legal term used to refer to the document that a grand jury has signed affirming accusations against a defendant. So it's the charging document as approved by a grand jury. That's what we mean by indictment. So how do you say that in your language? Trial information. Trial information or just information is similar to an indictment. It's the charging document, but one that has not gone through the process that would require the grand jury to approve it. So it's an accusing document or a charging document only approved by the prosecutor's office. Evidence. How do you say evidence in your language? Minutes of testimony was a term kind of specific to one of the exercises we did. I don't know if you hear this turn of phrase in Illinois or not. I don't hear it often in Nebraska, but when I work in Iowa, I hear it. And it refers to a summary of what the prosecution thinks their witnesses will say if there's a trial. So how do you say that? Grounds. Grounds. We move for detention on these grounds, or our grounds for this accusation are as follows. How do you say that in your language? Rights advisory, that's something you're likely to hear in an arraignment setting. Trial. Not all cases, as you guys know by now, go all the way to the trial stage, but when they do, it's the process of making the state prove the accusations beyond a reasonable doubt. So what's that called in your other language? Sometimes at trials, you'll find juries. Jury is a concept that exists here and may not exist in other countries. So what do you do with that term in your language? And then beyond a reasonable doubt, that's considered a standard of proof, meaning that you're almost completely certain of someone's guilt. Oh, whoops, we did rights advisory again, so you can skip that one or write it down again. And finally, charges. Charges. What word do you use in your language for charges? All right. So those are some important terms when you're dealing with arraignments. Were you guys all able to spend a little bit of time with the arraignment exercises? Oops.
No.
No time yet? All right, well, this will help you prepare for when you do them, which we'll do a couple of them tonight.
All right.
I just wonder how Marta in Polish would say trial information.
Trial information.
Informacje na temat przewodu?
Tak, ja tak myślałam. No informacje na temat rozprawy, procesu.
Yeah.
Ja bym tak to tłumaczyła.
And that's one thing. On some of I know that not all of us are Spanish interpreters, but if your language has roots in Europe at all, if you're able to kind of pick apart the Spanish terms, you're welcome to use those too as a guide for you. Trial information in Spanish, there's lots of ways to go about it, but we say escrito acusatorio de la fiscalía, or escrito de cargos de la fiscalía, I guess. So trial information, that would be accusing document approved by the prosecution is basically what we go for in Spanish. So I don't know if that helps you guys in Polish at all.
No, in Polish, Kelly, we have sometimes 3, 4, 5 words for one English word. So that's the problem with simultaneous or other. For example, I was just looking, arraignment would be postawienie w stan oskarżenia. I have 3 or 4 words.
For just
I don't have one word for that.
Exactly.
Testimony, podsumowanie zeznań w sumie, to chyba tak.
So, and that happens, it happens to us in Spanish also, where we'll end up using 3, 4 words. And I think the estimate I've heard, I can't quote a study for you on it, but I've heard that it takes about 25% more words in Spanish than it does in English. So I'm guessing Polish would be somewhere
about the same, if not more.
Which means that there's a couple strategies that you guys would want to do if your language is like this at all. And first is to come up with an ideal. The more mental representations, the quicker we are at recognizing and rendering these terms, the more words we can fit in without getting behind. So part of the problem when we get behind is that we're still not experienced enough quite yet to recognize arraignment and be able to spit out our 4-word phrase. So that's where the practice comes in. It's just about getting quicker at recognizing the words and remembering the way we render them. The other strategy is once you've presented the really long 4-word rendition, is that see if you can come up with an abbreviated form that you can use throughout the rest of your interpretation. So for example, if I'm the judge and I'm saying, hello, you're here for your arraignment hearing. Arraignment hearings are the hearings in which I give you an arraignment. So I have to say arraignment 4 times, within 2 sentences. Think about if there's a way for you to say hello in your other language. Hello, I'm the judge. You are here for your instruction regarding the charges. That would be a very literal way of saying what we say in Spanish. Is there a way in Polish to say, your long version and then just say after that a shortened version of that, like in your instruction on the charges? Then maybe I would say instruction, instruction, instruction. After that, if I'm starting to get behind.
Okay.
So that's a technique for the real world. For the exam, just to be safe, you're going to want to be as precise as possible. So it might involve saying those 4-word phrases more often. So the best technique now, while you're preparing for the exam, is to come up with I am an advocate of good old-fashioned paper flashcards. They work for me. I just carry them around all the time. But if you are, so inclined to use your app, your phone, I had a client, his name is Dwayne Parker out of Maryland. He introduced me, let me see if I can find this for you. It's called Cram, like what you would do, cramming right before an exam. And I've gotten reports from other people I work with that this is a really good flashcard creator. So I believe it's a website. I believe it's also an app. And you can create lists and lists and lists and lists of flashcards and then have them on your phone or on your computer for you to review whenever. So take your long phrases, turn them into flashcards, and then review those flashcards daily. And then come back to these arraignment exercises and see if those phrases come out of your mouth any easier than they did when you first started working with this terminology. Okay, just as a study tip. All right.
Kelly,
Okay. Out of these terms.
Kelly, what would be your Spanish translation for rights advisory?
Okay. Lots of times in court, I say explicación de los derechos because that's what the judge is doing. However, I'm hesitant to recommend that for the exam. For non-Spanish, that basically I say rights explanation because that's what the judge is doing. For the exam, I would probably stick closer to the word advisory and say advertencia or aviso, which is closer non-Spanish to like advisory.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so plaintiff are the people that bring the accusation. Any questions about the meaning here? We don't have to get too far into terminology because there are so many different languages. Now, if you do happen to have a person in here that you know speaks your language, there's a way to chat directly with that person. So, Marta and Ula, if you guys want to text each other, you just go to the chat.
Mm-hmm.
You can
look.
We've
done it.
Oh, you do? Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
You can address each other privately. I do not know what that's about. Sorry about that.
What's that?
Yes. Okay. So, or other people can do that as well as you find people in here who work your languages. Defendant. In Polish, are there two words for defendant?
No, just one.
Just
No.
one. That's nice.
Uh-huh.
In Spanish, there's a lot of words for criminal defendant. I've always just used acusado from like that's like saying the accused, and then el demandado. So if that's a new distinction to you, Spanish interpreters, let me know, and I'll email you about it so you can get that straight in your head. Arraignment is where you're formally advised of your charges. Hereby. What different ways do we say that in different languages? How do you say it in Polish?
Marta, niniejszym.
Which one? Yes, niniejszym.
Hereby, niniejszym.
Yes, niniejszym.
Okay.
That's what I would do. Niniejszym.
Also like a plea. Plea to is zarzut. That's a noun. But how do you plea? Then I have to use three words. Jak się pan odnosi do zarzutów? Winny czy niewinny? That's all the words I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
When
so you're going to want
to plea.
rehearse
those.
those.
If it would be simultaneous, it wouldn't fly because it's no way I could catch up.
Practice.
Yeah, I agree. Polish language is very long.
You'd be surprised how much you can fit in, but yes, look around and see if you can come up with concise renditions so that you don't get too far behind.
For check, for hereby, I would say jimto, which means like with this.
With this. Excellent. Thank you, Anna. And that's kind of what I want you guys to think about is, first of all, if you come across this and you don't have the benefit of somebody who shares your language, the first step is to figure out what it means. So you're going to see it in documents and hear it from judges, and I hereby declare so-and-so guilty or innocent or whatever. And what it means is by this, or like Anna said, with this. So think of ways that you would express that in your languages. Spanish, a lot of interpreters go for por la presente, por la presente. It's like with this document or this paragraph of words coming out of my mouth. Por la presente. Indictment, trial information, we kind of talked about those. Evidence, Spanish interpreters try to avoid evidencia, go for pruebas, and email me if you have questions on that.
Marta, we would use evidencia.
Ja bym powiedziała dowody.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Do you guys hear the phrase minutes of testimony in Illinois?
No, I
No?
haven't.
No, but it's like condo minutes, for example, condo meetings. So it's the same thing. It's like summation, basically, right?
Yes.
Of the
Summary. Mhm.
Yep, and that's what I use as summary. I've heard other people, if you hear minutes, you could also call it an informal report, because it's basically just a summary, just something informal. So don't hold me to this, but I'm giving you this as an idea of what you might hear in the trial.
Okay.
Yeah. Grounds is like saying basis.
Basis, podstawa.
So
okay.
something along those lines. Rights advisory, we talked about. It's like your explanation and information. Sometimes I use the verb. I'm here to inform you of your rights. Estoy aquí para informarles de sus sobre sus derechos in Spanish. Do some research. You'll definitely hear about trials and juries and beyond a reasonable doubt. You'll want to come up with a phrase in your language. We don't want a phrase that means beyond all possible doubt ever, because that's not what beyond a reasonable doubt means. You want it to mean beyond exactly what we see here, a reasonable doubt. So just take care to make sure your target language is leaving room for what we're trying to do in English with this phrase is account for the fact that, you know, if you didn't see the snow from the sky, fall from the sky with your own eyes, but you see it on the ground, there's always some kind of crazy chance that, I don't know, your neighbor brought a truck full of snow over and maybe, you know, but that's not reasonable. So with beyond a reasonable doubt, we're trying to say, okay, of course, fine. If you want to split hairs, sure, there could be a doubt, but we need it to be a reasonable doubt before we can consider this person guilty. All right. And charges can be considered the accusations.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay, good. So we have a sense of how some of this terminology works. Now that we have this fresh in our brains, I want to start out with a sight translation. Now, remember that on your test, you will have 2 sight translations, almost all of us. There are, I think, a couple languages out there where a target language back into English sight translation hasn't yet been written, but most of us will have 2. L2 to English, English to L2. There may be differing policies from state to state, but my understanding is that you need to earn your 70% on each of those sight translations. You can't get a 95 on the English one, you know, and a 60 on the other and expect to still be considered passing. You need to pass each independently. So keep that in mind. We won't in this class, in our time together, do a lot of working with our L2 into English. So I encourage you to find materials, even just work with the first few paragraphs in a newspaper article written in Polish or Chinese or Korean or Arabic, and practice putting that into English. All of your sight translations are about 225 words long, and all of them include time to review the document. When we're anxious on the day of the exam, this is our very first chance to jump into the exam and get going. We're really tempted to just start sight translating right away. But one thing I want you to always practice with me is taking time to at least skim over the document that you're going to be working with. Is this it? No. Okay. So the document you're about to see on the screen, I believe, is longer than 225 words. So we won't really worry too much about our 6-minute time period. Okay. But what I want you to practice is reviewing it. Okay. We're going to review it twice quickly. I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes each time. The first time through, I want you to kind of ask yourself what it is you're reading. So get an idea of what's this document, what's the purpose of this document. Don't worry too much about anything else, okay? So it's going to come on the screen. You're all individually going to be looking over this on your own. All right, let me see if I can make it just a little bit bigger. Nobody's sight translating yet because we are just reviewing the document. Let me get it a little bit bigger.
So I see only
Okay.
page 2, right? That's the one which State of Iowa plaintiff.
Yes, that's the one.
Okay, not the first one. Okay.
Not the first one. Okay. So it says in the Iowa District Court for Cass County. All right. And then you have numbers 1 through 5. So take a moment. I'm going to watch the clock. I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes. Just look through this, pretend it's exam day, skim over it, and then we'll talk about what this thing is. Ready, set, go. All right, so tell me, you can turn your microphones on or chat. Tell me, what is it we're looking at? What is this?
It's a plea, a written plea.
It's a written plea. Why would we need this during an arraignment?
Maybe in case the defendant's not present and you just have the attorney representing the defendant.
Yes, and in this particular state, they do that. Remember that arraignment hearings there's a little bit of difference between a first appearance and arraignment. And actually in the shadowing exercises for the week, you can hear how the laws are written to try to get a sense of how some of that works. But arraignment is basically where you come and you hear an explanation, a formal explanation of what you've been charged with. Now, if it's just an easy little charge like running a red light and you're going to get a $25 fine and you just want to get this whole thing over with, you can go straight into a plea right there. But if it's something more serious and you guys are interpreting for somebody who's accused of drunk driving or anything basically that could result in jail time, it's less advisable to just push forward right away and get a plea over with. People will almost always plead not guilty on the day of their arraignment. And so this is an example of some of the terminology that you may hear the next time that you're called in for an arraignment. Now, I'm going to give you 1 more minute, and I want you to do one more preparation technique. Do you guys all remember from your grammar classes what a subject is and what a verb is? The verb is the action word in the sentence, right? Like, for example, understand. Understand is the verb. The subject is the person, right? And then we get into like this, my attorney, John, whoever, that's actually the object, so we won't worry too much about that. But when you get into really convoluted legalese, which you will on the sight translations on your exam, if you are in doubt, find the subject of the sentence and the verb in the section, the very essence of whatever's written there, and rely on that, you know, at least get to that for your sight translation. So I'm going to give you just a little bit to go back through. And I want you to take some time. I have it on the screen. It's annoying because if you're like me, you like to have a piece of paper and then you can mark on stuff. Unfortunately, on the day of the exam, you won't be able to write on anything. So here we are. But I want you to look, I'm gonna have to put in the Iowa District Court up here. But go through this and just take 30 seconds to go through each, especially the complicated parts, and identify the very essence of the sentence, which is subject verb. Ready? Go. Okay. Depending on how far away from grammar and how much we loved or hated grammar, you know, how easy that exercise was will vary. That's something that we'll come back to and we'll practice often throughout the class, because just that very basic, being able to boil down all of these words to the most essential part, I plead, I have had, I have read, all of that stuff will help you unravel complicated language on the day of the test. All right, so now that we've done all that, what I want to do, I'm going to make sure everybody's on mute. For those of you who I can see on your camera, I'm going to see your lips moving. I want you guys to take some time, even if you've already done this exercise, and I want you to put it into your L2. Let me make sure I got you all on mute. I believe so. Then, even though that we're a diverse bunch and we're not all going to understand everybody's rendition, I'm going to ask for volunteers to do a little bit of sight translating for the group. All right? So first on your own, everybody, we'll take 3 or 4 minutes to do this. All right?
Do we need to say the state of Iowa, plaintiff, and defendant, all of this?
Ula, thank you so much. Yes. On the exam day, one of the things you'll notice is, like when you look at the practice exams we're doing, is that exam writers are sneaky about fitting scoring units into places on the page that you might forget to read. So it's very important on the day of the exam to read into your other language every single thing that you see on the page. So yes, you're going to start all the way with State of Iowa plaintiff versus Mario Lafata defendant, on and on.
Okay, I have a quick question to Marta. This is how do you say shortly written arraignment and plea of not guilty?
Pisemny,
Postawienie w stan zarzutów oskarżenia? It takes forever.
Stan oskarżenia i nieprzyznanie się do winy albo coś takiego.
Oh.
And remember when you sight translate, you have time because it's all written there. You don't have to worry about forgetting. All right. I'll put you on mute. You guys can send chat messages if you need to, and that way everybody can jump in and begin your sight translation. Ready? Go. All right, let's practice. let's practice the very intimidating act of interpreting for our colleagues whether or not we understand the language that we're putting this into. Is there anybody who would be willing to start this site translation for me? The first, we could start with the state of Iowa, probably end around under oath states.
I'll begin.
All right, go for it. Thank you.
Estado de Iowa, denunciante versus Mario Lafata, acusado, caso número CR 089-132. Lectura de cargos por escrito y declaración de no culpable. Ahora viene el acusado nombrado anteriormente en el caso que ha constado por la presente y bajo juramento declara.
Nicely done, nicely done. All right, how did everybody deal with comes now the above named defendant? Remember what I was saying about identifying the subject and the verb? What's the subject in this part?
Defendant.
Defendant, right? And the verb is
coming, essentially.
right. Exactly. And this is an archaic English construction. It sounds perfectly normal in Spanish, for example, but in English, we normally put the subject first. So when you see this in English, you may be thrown, and that's where it's important to be able to identify the subject and the verb so you can arrange it properly in your language. So Dan said in Spanish, presents himself now, I think, the defendant was how he organized it. It sounded great. One thing for my Spanish folks to keep in mind, and this may apply to other European languages anyway, criminal does exist in Spanish. Avoid it as your rendition of criminal case, criminal charges. Criminal in Spanish has a connotation of sort of a violent crime. So if you use it in your rendition, you're altering the meaning a little bit and you're making your listener think, well, I didn't kill anyone. I just ran away from this accident, right? So you want to use penal, which is a word we have in English, penal code, all that stuff. That's a better equivalent for most contexts here. So if, think about if that would apply to your language or not. All right?
Okay.
I liked how you arranged this whole written arraignment and plea of not guilty. And there were more words there in Spanish than we have in English, and you managed kind of to organize it all really well. Okay? And basically he said reading of the charges in writing and statement of not guilty kind of was how it would, if you were going to be really literal and turn it back around. So thank you very much. Okay, do I have a volunteer for number 1? Any language? Oops.
Not ready yet.
Not ready yet, or you're ready?
Do you want another Spanish?
I can do check if you want.
What was that?
I can do check.
Okay, check will work, and then Mary Ellen, I'll grab you on the next one. Okay? Go for it, Anna.
Byla jsem obmezena s mým advokátem, panem Johnem Maximem, a rozumím, že mám právo na obžalobu na otevřeném soudu a tímto se dobrovolně vzdávám tohoto práva a volím místo toho podepíši to, že písemné obviněním a prosbou nevinného podotýkám, že části pro další řízení, které jsou vypočítány od data obvinění, budou vypočteny od data podání tohoto písemného obžaloby a odvolání nevinného. I really struggle with that plea of not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like the check wants me to say, like, I request
Mm-hmm.
as
Okay.
non-guilty
Oh, you mean
person.
like when you stick to plea, if you stick really literally to the meaning of plea, it turns into request?
Yeah, I feel that way.
I
And then I
agree.
also feel that the word not guilty becomes that I'm saying that a non-guilty person.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm creating a noun out of something that I feel is supposed to be an adjective.
And, you know, as interpreters, we're at liberty to do that. And that's a technique I use a lot in Spanish where I'll take a noun and I'll turn it into a verb to make it fit more logically in my rendition. So turning that into a noun is not incorrect, depending on how your language works. Research court hearings, like I know you emailed that YouTube is saving the day for you. So see if you can catch what the actual phrase is. If they say, do you plead guilty or not guilty, you know, is that done in your system, and if so, what are the exact words?
Yeah, thank you. Also, I have a really exciting news.
Oh.
I actually found a law dictionary, so it's not just a general dictionary. It's now out of print. So I actually only found it because I have a law professor who found it once, who goes to the Czech Republic all the time, and he let me borrow it. So all I did was I made copies.
I would too.
And then I had to make a 3-ring binder out of it. So it's very awkward to try to carry somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's print, but I'm just like, if I could say one thing, I would say absolutely, if you have the chance to invest in a law dictionary and not just a general dictionary, it's worth the investment.
Do it. Good. That's great. I'm so excited you found it. One thing for you, Anna, and for my Spanish interpreters, in Mexico, they're doing an overhaul of the judicial system, and lots of new terminology has been born that wasn't born when we started as court interpreters in the 90s and the 70s in the US. And one phrase that they're starting to use for plea of not guilty is rechazo de los cargos, which, Anna, for you would be rejection of the charges. So that might be a way you can deal with plea of not guilty if there's no made term of art already in existence, so that you can avoid the whole request and the not guilty person. Consider using the word rejection of the charges, seeing if that will work in your language. How did you deal with this? I understand that at times, to me, this is very muddled and hard to get through.
It is hard.
What did you do for computed? Did you just, is there a little literal term for computed that will work here?
Count from?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I'm
Calculate.
where I was at here. Will be computed from the date of filing. Will be given from the date of filing.
Or counted, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Programar.
Will be given though. That's what I
Would be given. Mm-hmm.
Given. So basically what this is saying is that scheduling of further hearings are counted as of the original date. So this is all addressing the whole speedy trial, blah, blah, blah. So, but I found that sentences like this are not uncommon with legalese. So do some research in your terms, trying to figure out how to say as of a date, from this date forward, by this date, because you will come across those kind of notions. In English, it's like a big deal to say you have to have this in by this date, whereas in other cultures, we're not so married to a time frame, and so it's sometimes difficult to express those ideas.
How would you say it otherwise in English? What other words would you use to say the same thing in English?
Sure, I understand. Let me read it. I understand that times for further proceedings, which are computed from the date of arraignment, will be computed from the date of filing of this written arraignment and plea of not guilty. So I would say the time periods, or no, I would say the scheduling of additional hearings, which are counted as of the date of this arraignment, instead will be counted as of the date this written arraignment or this form is turned in.
Okay.
That's what they're trying to say is,
That's what I thought.
yeah, is all the legal time periods that we have to adhere to as of the date of the arraignment will be adhered to as of the date we turn this document in.
Okay.
Basically, this document counts instead of the arraignment hearing and all those different words. Okay. Okay, Mary Ellen, you were ready to do part 2 for me. Let me hear it. Are you there? Did we lose you, Mary Ellen?
Sorry, I didn't.
Oh, there we are.
I was reading and then I looked. Okay. He recibido una copia de el escrito acusatorio de que me hace cargo con el delito de no cumplir en detenerme y dejar información o rendir asistencia en el lugar del hecho del accidente en el cual el acusado fue involucrado, como es obligatorio por el Código de Iowa, sección 321.263. He leído este escrito de cargos y me he familiarizado con su contenido.
Excellent. Good job. That was another one that was not easy. So this is tricky. Anytime you have to read the charge, they all happen to sound formal. Sometimes they're very succinct in English, and sometimes they're kind of long and drawn out like this one. And it's okay if you just go literally, which is what you did. And I really liked how you said, I think you said falta de cumplir y detenerme a dejar información. You had cumplir in there, and I liked that. That sounded good for our Spanish interpreters. One tip for everybody: when you, if this were the site translation document, we have both the term indictment and the term trial information, one after the other. Remember, the difference there is that the information is approved only by the prosecution's office, and the indictment has been approved by the grand jury. So if you're accused with an information, then you have a right to a preliminary hearing. So there's a difference in the legal function of these two terms in English, meaning that you will want to have two different renditions for these terms in your other language. So research them. In the glossary that's on the second page, you'll find it when you access this stuff and go look. For Spanish interpreters, we have two possibilities, one for indictment, one for trial information. You can research other options. For interpreters of other languages, these are the meanings, so research and see what you can come up with. All right? Song, are you here? Would you be willing to put any of this into Chinese for us?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, read a couple. Maybe numbers 3. Well, you can read the rest. 3, 4, and 5.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
3，我被建议和理解，我可以答辩有罪、无罪、以前的定罪，或者是宣告无罪。4，为了这个提审的目的，我有足够的时间和上面名字律师来讨论我的案子。我放弃以后的进行答辩的时间。5，我答辩无罪， 对于上面针对我的指控，我答辩无罪。Over.
Wow, excellent.
Thank you.
Very much. Hey, how many times have you worked through this document?
What do you mean?
Is this the first time you've seen this, or did you look at it previously during the week?
This is the first time I'm doing it.
All right.
Sight is not very difficult for me, but
Okay.
the first paragraph and the second paragraph, like the one you discussed, the time for further proceeding, those are kind of, my grammar is not very bad, but those are really difficult for me.
They are really difficult. And that's those, when you get into really long stuff that you're like, what is going on? You can always break it down into smaller sentences. So you can like take this, for example, take I understand out. You know, you'll come back to that later. So this is a technique you guys can use on the exam. You could say something like this in your other language. Schedules for additional hearings, which tend to be figured from the arraignment date, will be figured from the date I turn in this written document. And then you come back and you can add this to the end. I understand this.
Oh, I see.
This is a technique that will work for the exam, because the game, if you can call it that, on the exam is to render everything. So in the absence of the ability to think of a way to sound really fancy and beautiful in your language, chop it up into smaller pieces. It might sound ugly, who cares? Get all of those pieces communicated and just keep going. Because the point of this exam is to render everything. Most people fail because of omissions. So if you spend 6 minutes trying to figure out how to sound really good, and then you finally sound really good on this last sentence, but you omit everything from number 2 to number 5, you failed the exam. So a better strategy is
Kelly, I'm so sorry. Let me ask you this. So the order of the things that you say, the words that you use, it's not really as important as omitting, right? Like you need to make sure that you put everything.
Correct.
I mean, you translate everything that's there.
Exactly.
The order is not necessary.
Let's imagine I understand is a scoring unit. You skip it. You say all of this stuff in Polish first, and then you come back and you put I understand at the end. You get that point because you said it.
Okay, so we can say it at the end, and it's also fine.
Yes. So mess with that as you're practicing these types of documents with really long stuff. Like, what if I chop it into smaller pieces? And the other thing, you don't want to make a habit of this in your practice as an on-the-job interpreter, but you do not get downgraded for adding things on the exam. So notice how I said, say times for proceedings, computed, da, 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 da. I understand this. This original document doesn't say this, but if you say it in your interpretation, you won't get counted wrong because it's not a distortion of meaning, So, and there's no mechanism on the exam for penalizing us for adding things. So, you don't want to embellish, but you can put small words in if that's what it takes to conserve the whole message in your language.
What was the other word that you used for further proceedings?
Additional. I said additional. Mm-hmm.
Kelly.
Yes.
How would you handle when they have these footnotes, like the 4, the 3 that we see scattered everywhere? I think these are for a different purpose on this practice handout, but if they ever have anything like symbols, parentheses, or a small 4, how would you handle them?
So, okay, so there's a couple different things. Like these little footnotes, you don't have to worry about seeing those on the exam, and the only purpose they serve is to show you the possible terminology on this exercise. If on a document you're reading in real life, they have a footnote, usually what I do is I go straight to the footnote because that's how I would read it to myself, you know, and that's how the person who would read it, if they could read English, would read it. So I would say, Mario Lafata, defendant, and then I'd go down here and it would say blah, 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 whatever it says. I would just go straight to those points in the document. On the day of the exam, I've heard some people try to say, okay, open parentheses, crime, open parentheses, S, close parentheses, you know, almost like you're dictating to a transcriptionist. Don't do that. You don't have to worry about doing that on the exam. So and probably on the exam, they won't have the word crime and then the parentheses S. If they do, consider making your rendition this with the crime or crimes, because that's what we mean in English. This is a form and you just fill in the information. So whoever wrote the form didn't know if the person's accused of one crime or more than one. So I would just add crime or crimes, especially in this format because I have a little bit more time than I do if I'm doing a simultaneous.
Okay. And in the portion of the exam where you're translating from your language, in my case Spanish, into English, what do you do if they have something in English, whether it was by accident or not? But if they have, I'm side translating into English, but there's a sentence in English, how do you handle that? Do you leave it in English or do you explain what's happening?
If you have time, and I will double check with Sophia on this to make sure I'm giving you guys proper information. But if you have time, I mean, like if it's, I don't know, Iowa code or whatever. So everything else is in Spanish and it just says Iowa code sections. I would probably, you would just be putting it in English. So you would probably leave it in English. It wouldn't make sense to put it in Spanish because the idea is to produce a rendition for an English-speaking listener if you're working from your L2 into English. So if there happen to be English words on there, you just read them. And then that does bring me to another point. Anna had to wrestle with Mr. John H. Maxon. Okay, so how do you deal with names? We've got Mr. Mario Lafata up here.
So can I say
Yes.
two things about that? So the first question that actually David was asking was a really great question, but I want to address what I usually do to see if, but kind of reverse that, where I'm actually going into the target language and I'm saying Iowa code section.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually keep that in English because that's the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I keep it in English even in the target language.
Mm-hmm. Because it's a proper noun.
That's the person's name. My question, the way that I handled it was the Czech way of handling it, but my question is, should I have handled it the Czech way or should I have left his name as his name? Because that's what most Americans prefer to hear.
Yes, and that's kind of what I was getting at. So for the purposes of the exam, I would say definitely don't shy away from decent pronunciation. You know, if we see, if it's the state of Iowa versus, and this is a very Czech name, you don't have to pervert the Czech pronunciation to make it sound Anglo in order to get those points on the exam. You can leave it as it's written in Czech or in Polish or in Korean. You don't have to dumb it down for the exam evaluator is what I'm trying to get at. So that you wouldn't lose points for doing that. In the real world, I don't go all in on my Spanish pronunciation of names. I try to say it in a way that the court reporter is going to be able to write it down.
But do you translate the name? For example, John in Polish is Jan. So what would you do in this case?
Great question. No, you can leave it alone.
Okay.
You can. Right.
I have a question regarding point 3.
Sure.
How would you say it in that second part of that statement in better English? So I have been advised and understand that I may plead guilty, not guilty, comma, or former conviction or acquittal. It's somehow kind of like, it doesn't make much sense.
Formalne oskarżenie.
I'm sorry?
Formalne oskarżenie albo uniewinnienie.
This is not formal, it's former, which means it happened before, right?
Right. It's so strange. So here's our glossary.
How would you say the meaning of that?
Sure. So what they're trying to say is you may plead one of 3 ways, and you can either say I'm guilty, I'm not guilty, or you can indicate that you have been formerly convicted or acquitted of this same charge. So this is a really obscure reference, and I don't hear it very often, but this is what they're trying to say. So if I were to reword this into English, the sentence would sound like this. I have been advised and understand that I may plead guilty or not guilty, or that I may indicate that I have been convicted or acquitted of this same charge previously.
Which totally they don't. This is so unclear in this document.
Yes. So good news is that on the exam, you guys are dealing with something that has been statistically verified. So they have been able to eliminate the types of constructions that you see here. They're not going to count it against you if a phrase is reasonably understandable. This, I don't think, falls into reasonably understandable, but I'm including it in class because it's a document that comes directly from an arraignment, and it's good for us to wrestle with how we're going to deal with it if we do see something like that.
Hopefully not.
But everything on the exam, they've tested with many, many interpreters, and they've seen, okay, these interpreters obviously know how to do their job, and they knew what to do with this phrase, so we know that good interpreters can deal with this phrase, so we're going to test everybody on it. Or even our best interpreters couldn't figure out former conviction or acquittal. They thought that was so weird, it made no sense. We are not going to use that as a scoring unit on the exam. So there's some statistical control that's been built in to the test to help avoid strange things like this. But in the real world, you'll see some poorly written stuff.
And the same is in the fourth one. I have had sufficient time to discuss my case with the above-named attorney, and I waive any further time in which to enter a plea. So basically, I don't want to spend any more time on that, to enter my plea in a different way, right?
Exactly. I don't want to demand additional time. So further is a synonym of further is additional.
Right.
Yeah.
That's this type of language.
So I don't need additional time.
Exactly.
By odpowiedzieć na zarzuty.
Tak.
So now that you've been through this, there is a glossary built in. So take some time and kind of look through. Obviously, the Spanish won't help all of us, but the notes can kind of give you some additional information on some of this stuff. And practice this again and again and again. And remember, your job is to produce a rendition that would be as easy for your listener to understand in your other language as it would be for them to understand if they heard it in English. So at the end of the day, this whole thing, I may plead guilty, not guilty, or former conviction or acquittal, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense just to the average English speaker either. So if your rendition is a little bit awkward, you can always argue, well, the written document was pretty awkward, right? We're just trying to bring people on equal playing field. So, okay. I have a question here in the chats. Let's see. Numbers. Oh, okay. So on the numbers, if this were your document on the exam, you would want to say, because again, you want to render the entire thing as you see it on the page. So 1, 2, you're going to want to say the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as they're numbered here. Those would be omissions if you didn't. How do you say this? The CR 089131. There's debate in the Spanish world, you know, all over the map on that. I tend to think, for the purposes of the exam, this is a chance for you to show how fancy your Spanish can be. So if you want to say 89,132, go for it, because they might very well say it that way in Spanish. But it's still correct to say 0, 8, 9, 1, 3, 2. Down here, I would probably go with the hundreds in Spanish. I'd say 321.236, just for a little extra formality. But I don't know that it's necessarily incorrect if we don't go that way. Yes.
Kelly, I have a question. So finally, you have read the number 5, okay? Me declaro no culpable de los cargos de los cuales se me acusa. And then you have 2 lines there for signatures. Do you have to say signed by so and so?
On the exam, if this were your document, there would be a signature here. So, you know, and it would probably be legible. So you would probably read the name and then render the word defendant, and then read this name and render the word defense attorney. You could add signed by, because again, we don't get penalized for signatures. If you're reading this out loud, I guess you're not putting it on the record. So you don't necessarily in real life have to try to decipher the signature. You could always just say signature and then acusado, signature, abogado defensor.
And what about the last line? Because, you know, that is after, and it's como at the very end. And I could say al pie de página una nota que dice.
Yes. So what Margarita said is, for this very last, kind of like your footnote question, Dan, you could render in your language at the end of the document, there is a note that says, and then render that. Yes, you could.
Okay.
You could, for sure. Okay?
So basically, I understand that certain terms, they have to be said in English, because it's either name or of something, and or name of it's just waste of time to try even to interpret into other language. Is that correct?
The name, like state of Iowa, Cass County, that type of thing. Yes. You know, if you have terms for state and county, you can use those, but you wouldn't necessarily need to try to alter Iowa or that kind of thing. Like today, for example, in my trial, oh my goodness, they were saying, let me just think. I work for the Omaha Police Department, Special Victims Unit, sex crimes against minor children or something, just a huge long string. Ideally, in the real environment, I would put that into something understandable for my listener, but sometimes, you know, you just don't have time. So I was saying, I work for the police department in the section, and then I would just say everything else in English. So that's a technique also. You can give like a little bit of an introduction and then say the name of the college or the department they're working in or the business or whatever in English, like agency names, Project Harmony, Nebraska Families Collaborative, like those types of things, leave them as they are. Because at the end of the day, the people you're interpreting for are going to, in the phone book, look for Nebraska Families Collaborative. They're going to be getting mail from Nebraska Families Collaborative. They aren't going to get it from whatever your rendition of that in Korean is, right? So those proper nouns you can leave. You are correct in that.
Kelly, what about the website? underneath, I mean, at the very bottom of the page, do you need to translate it like as it is?
No, this is just my citation from where I got this document. So this will not be on the test. And honestly, in the real world, if I were interpreting this in court for real, since I'm not putting this on the record, I would just say, you know, and the author cited this website, and just let them look at the website. That's how I would handle it. If this were in Spanish and I were reading it out loud onto the record and there were a website listed, you know, if it's a real trial and this becomes the only version of this document that becomes, part of the record, the official record, then I probably would read it out letter by letter. But,
yeah, I have a question.
It would take a long time.
Yes, it would. Yes, David, what's up?
Yeah, the last sentence, State of Iowa, Cass County subscribes sworn to and acknowledged before by Maria La Fata this 8th day of November 2017. So here the subject is actually clerk of court, right? The subject is omitted, but can you?
The subject, yes. The clerk of court is our subject, or I guess, I, you know, as the clerk of court. Okay. Yes, but you're right.
But in this case, can I flip the sentence, make a Maria La Fata subject and interpret the rest of the way?
Yes, and that's an excellent technique. So, State of Iowa, Cass County subscribes sworn to acknowledge before me by blah, blah, blah. This is an example of legalese where it's, you know, fancy and not clear in English. We are called upon to preserve the level of formality, but sometimes we just have to get the meaning across, and it makes more sense to say, Mario La Fata signed, swore to, and acknowledged this before me in the state of Iowa in Cass County on November 8th, 2017. If that's your rendition, you get all the information in there, it counts. And I think it counts both in the real world and on the exam. So don't be afraid to shuffle word order to make it clear for your listener. Okay? Good question. All right, well, we are just about out of time, which is amazing. So please, please, please take some time to perfect this document. Like we talked about the very first week, the procedure I want you following is the focus, feedback, fix it thing we talked about. So I want you performing the exercise, possibly falling flat on your face. I want you thinking about your mistakes or your questions, just like we did right now. Look up terms and rehearse them, meaning flashcards, the paper variety, or that CRAM website that I talked about. And then I do want you to go back and repeat the exercise. It's very tedious. It's tedious work, but that repetition is really what turns you from an amateur interpreter into a professional level one. It's brutal. This is going to be a long few weeks together, but you'll see a lot of growth between now and the end of our time together if you really put the time in to redo your work. And then drill and kill, as we say in language instruction, those terms just go over and over and over and over and over. I have a lot of students and clients who take their lunch hour time. You know, you're tired, you've been going all morning, you have a whole afternoon left ahead of you, so actual interpreting work probably doesn't fit. But sitting there with your flashcards just might, while you eat your lunch, go through your 20 new words. And both ways, so we see it on the screen right now in English, so you could have written arraignment on one side and then your rendition on the other. Quiz yourself first on everything in English, but then flip the cards and see if you can recognize the term in your L2 and spit out the English. Both of those things help you with the flexibility you need to be able to come up with these terms quickly. So add some flashcard study time in. Now, we will meet again, like I said, on Friday in the meantime, I'm going to be working on posting in Canvas the resources I told you about, pros.com, that kind of stuff for terminology. I will also post some grammar resources. If you are interested in getting better at identifying subjects and verbs really quickly, I have a few free quizzes you can access. And I'm also going to post Cram, that online flashcard resource, since I've heard a couple of my current clients like that quite a bit. So those are my jobs, and I'm going to put this recording up for those who couldn't make it tonight. So I have my work cut out for me. And then in the meantime, catch up with the arraignment stuff, because that's what we're going to work on. Next Monday, we will be moving on to change of plea hearings. So that's what would have followed this. They pled not guilty in their arraignment, meaning I'm not going to acknowledge my guilt or innocence of these charges right now. I'm going to persist in my innocence. I'm going to talk to an attorney. If this person decides, okay, it's better if I just plead guilty and move on with my sentencing, then they do this procedure that we'll work with starting next week. So take some time to brush up on what a change of plea hearing is, what a sentencing hearing is. And then we have some shadowing exercises, which I saw, Margarita, you like those especially. They're helping you get your feet under you with simultaneous. I'm glad about that. So if you struggle with simul, shadow. There's an exercise here for you. I've got consecutive change of plea for language neutral and a change of plea consecutive for Spanish. And then I have 2 simultaneous for sentencings. One of them is nice and slow, one of them is faster. So we've got all that stuff coming up. Work on that, get a feel for it before week 4 if you have time. And remember, you will have access to all this stuff until August 2nd, and you can download it all and save it for the rest of all time. So keep coming back. Yes?
I have a question. Well, sorry for interrupting, and maybe I was too tired, but I don't remember. There is one of the exercises. I do not remember which one. I think it's the one where there is a lady that is called Edna. Her name is Edna. Mm-hmm. And in the recording, some of the parts were in English and some of the parts were in Spanish. So I had to make sure that when it was in English, I will say it in Spanish and vice versa. Because actually, in one of those lines, what happened to me is that I interpreted in the same language because it was in English and I said it in English again. So it was interesting because I had to remember to keep on task, actually to change the language. But the recording is bilingual.
That's funny.
I think, I don't know. Maybe I was even dreaming about it. I don't know.
I do remember the Edna script. I was just trying to look for it for you. I think it's this one. And maybe if it's consecutive, maybe I had it all. Oops, whoops. Or maybe it's, whoops. Maybe it's left over and I meant to put it all in English. I don't know. Where is that one?
No. The transcript is fine. The transcript is fine. It's a recording.
Oh, okay. Well, good grief.
So I was just doing the recording, and when I was doing the recording, so I'm recording myself.
That's
and
funny.
I need to make sure. And then after I did my recording, now I'm listening to the recording and then looking at the transcript. And then I realized, oh, what happened? Now, the transcript is all in English, but the recording was bilingual.
Oh, and that could be too. It could have been a bilingual recording. That sounds like something I would do late at night trying to hurry to get this stuff posted for you. It also could be that for the Spanish interpreters, there is stuff that's only in English, and then there is some that's there for you in Spanish. So maybe you had the script for the Spanish only, but you accessed, no, you had the script for the English, but you accessed the Spanish recording. Who knows? But I'll look around for it because I know which exercise it is. I don't remember what. That's funny. That's
I have
funny.
a question, Kelly. So
Yes.
you always write to complete something by 12:59 a.m. So I just wonder why, because it looks like you want us today is 16. So by 12:59 it will be 16. It will be already minute later will be 17. So you still want tonight us to report how we did on this exercise on site translation, correct?
Yes, but that the 11:59 p.m. sounds very specific and rigid, but it comes from the computer program. It automatically generates a time of night that something's due. So you guys, this is just for your own edification and our work together. I don't report to Sophia and say, so-and-so only turned everything in late, or so-and-so never turned anything in. I really love it when you guys reflect on your work, because that helps me understand what's working, what's not. You can ask questions, I go through, but it's not like a grade traditional thing. So if you don't turn any information on your arraignment exercises in until the end of this week or the start of next week or whenever you finish them, that's okay.
So we're talking about the exercise which we did today during the class, or on all listed under week 3, which is numerals.
Right.
So which one are you talking about? Because I didn't know I should go ahead and prepare them. So it would mean this plus read all the other exercises on week 4, or that's, I don't know.
No, just when I wrote the exercise, I was referring to all the stuff, all of the arraignment exercises. But I put April 16th here so we could not be too confused about when we're meeting. I didn't, you know, but so it's all kind of loosey-goosey. So ideally, yes, everything, but if you don't have them all done and only want to comment on site, that's fine. If you want to finish all of these over the course of the week and report on it at the end of the week, that's fine. The computer may say late, but just ignore it. It doesn't matter.
It did for me.
And then before the next Monday, because it happens in my case, Zach always is something on Friday or Thursday. But so you want us also to go through exercises of week 4?
Yes.
Or we wait until week 4 to do this?
No, I would like for you guys to get in the habit of trying to try out the exercises at least once before class. Don't master them because we'll work with them in class and talk about the terms. But I'd like for you to start to review them a little bit before we meet, if possible. If
so
it's not possible,
okay.
Yeah, before class if possible. If not, still come to class. You'll still learn stuff. But try to set the goal for yourself to at least have worked through them once before we see each other.
Okay.
Just a loose goal.
And the other question, you said that if someone has the app of Canvas on a cell, then our school is free for instructors or free for instructors?
Free for instructors.
For FOR, not
FOR.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend that app. It's really nice and easy to use.
And that's great. I didn't even really know about it. So free
it's
for
very nice.
And
it's basically the same thing, just on your phone.
And email me if you get lost. We'll get ourselves through it.
It's worth to get.
And the last question, in your previous lectures, you said something about the app on a phone, which gives you that little delay when you do the simultaneous interpreting or shadowing or whatever. Did I understand you correctly? Something like that exists and you don't have to have special equipment?
I do believe that something like that exists, and I cannot remember the name of the app right now. That it'll allow you to slow the app down. So you can play it at it'll speed it up. You can play it 1.5 times and it'll sound really fast, or you can put it at less than 1. 1 is regular. I will research. I'm going to add that to my list. Renee is my student who told me about that app, and I'm going to find out what it's called for you.
Okay. And just so you know, guys, Smart Recorder is a very nice app too, and you can record yourself. You can record Kelly, and also go back and forth with the interpretation or whatever is there. You can slow it down. You can speed it up. It's a very nice app.
What's the name?
Smart Recorder.
Smart Recorder.
I think Dave said, or the other gentleman mentioned that app, and it's a very nice app to record yourself. You can go back and forth, and you can record Kelly, you can record yourself, and then you can speed it up, you can stop. It's a very nice app to use for recording.
All right. Okay, so we will be in touch. I have several things on my list I'll be working on. You guys have plenty of exercises to work on, and do remember to put that flashcard drill into your routine so that you can lock in some of these terms. And we'll keep practicing. I'll see those of you who can join us on Friday. I'll see you over lunch, and otherwise I'll see everybody else on Monday.
Have a good night.
Thank you,
Good night.
Kelly.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.